Hello everyone, and welcome back to our third video of our small series. We're making a custom engine cover for our S550 Mustang. And as a small recap, we went ahead and took our prototype part, or our plug from our first video, and we wanted to make a mold. So we attached flange material around it, then applied film release agent, then tooling gel coat, and then several layers of fiberglass just to thicken it up and strengthen it. And once those layers set, we went ahead and installed a structural brace just to give it some rigidity. And then we went ahead and demolded our part. And once we cleaned out the mold, it came out looking really good and shiny, so now we're ready to make some parts. So let's get started. And for our very first step, let's go and apply some mold release wax. And I'm going to use an applicator pad and go ahead and do small circular motions in one little area at a time. Wait about a minute, and then we're going to buff it out with a microfiber cloth. And this is the same stuff we used in the previous video just to help the mold remove the original part. Now we're going to use the same process as far as getting the part removed from the mold. And we're going to do this with 3 coats just to make sure every area is covered and everything is nice and shiny and smooth. Next, we're going to go ahead and apply our film release agent. Now this stuff is really good because it provides a barrier between your part and your mold, and it's actually like a green film, which makes it really easy to release the mold later on. Now you can do the same thing we did in the previous video and go ahead and use a foam brush to apply your 3 coats, or you can go ahead and use a spray gun. So we're using a high velocity, low pressure spray gun, and we're going to do a few test sprays. That looks pretty good. And we'll do one more over here so that way you can see a little better. Yep, pretty good fanning. That looks pretty good. So let's go ahead and bring it to the mold, and that way we get a nice, clean, even layer. And for our first coat, we're going to kind of mist it up a little bit. We don't want it completely soaked. We just want to damp it up just a little bit. So I'm going to do just a nice fine misting right now. And then we're going to apply 3 coats total. So we're going to go ahead and apply the first one right now. I just want to make sure every area is covered. And then the last 2 will be a nice medium coating with 45 minutes of drying in between. And after an hour has passed, we let the final coat dry, and taking a look what we got, this looks great. We see a nice, beautiful shine. That's exactly what you want with this mold release agent. When you have a good shine, that means you applied it perfectly. And now we can go ahead and move on to the gel coat process. So I have a can of black gel coat, which is going to come out looking really good. And by the way, please use a respirator when using this product. It is very potent. I want to go ahead and scoop a little bit out and start putting it in my mixing container. I'm not very good at pouring it straight from the can, so I'm going to just use a cup. And now I can go ahead and add my 1.5% of catalyst, or my hardener. And I already pre-measured it, so I can just go ahead and pour it right in. And that looks pretty good right there. Let me go ahead and get a popsicle stick. And we'll go ahead and scoop out what's left. And then we'll go ahead and stir for 1 minute. That will ensure that everything is mixed properly and that the application goes on smoothly. And after about a minute, went ahead and loaded up my paint gun. And I'm going to try to do it without making too much of a mess because this stuff is pretty sticky. Okay, it looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and get the cap on. Come on. And there we go. And we'll go ahead and do a test spray real quick. Oh yeah, that's really good. Comes out very nicely. That's beautiful. And we'll go ahead and start laying down some coats. And these are going to be very thick coats, and we're going to make several passes. You're going to probably make at least 8 passes. But we're going to start with the first coat, make sure everything is covered. Now you won't see this on camera, but between the camera shots, I went ahead and took my thickness gauge just to measure out the thickness of all the coats I'm laying down, just to get an idea of see where I'm at, which I'll show you how it looks towards the end. So let's continue on. And that looks to be our last layer, so let's go ahead and do a thickness test. Now I'm going to do the flange area just because I don't have to worry about it being perfect. And it looks like, yep, that's right at 25 mils. That's exactly what we want, so that's perfect. And of course, I always like to bring the camera in during our little milestones. And taking a look at this gel coat came out looking really good. We have some orange peel, which is actually what we really want. When you have orange peel when putting this application on, that's a good thing. And looking at this, it looks like we have every area covered. So far, this is looking really good. I like how uniform it is. That's awesome.
The next day.
And now that we let this sit overnight, so far the gel coat looks awesome. There's no cracks or wrinkles. Now we can go ahead and start laying up the fiberglass. And like the previous video, always like to start off with my tissue thickness layer, just because it makes it easier to contour to the gel coat. And we're going to start with vinyl ester resin instead of polyester resin. Now I know in the previous video I used polyester resin on the mold because I really wasn't concerned with heat. However, for this particular part we're making, it is an engine cover, so we're going to need something that's a little more heat resistant, and vinyl ester resin is a better application for that. And we're going to do actually temperature tests towards the end of this video. And with our first layer complete, now we can begin our second layer, which is slightly thicker fiberglass. It is 3/4 ounce, and it's very easy to work with, and we're going to do the same process with our chip brush and roller. Taking a look at that, so far it looks really good. I don't see any air bubbles, and you can see all the little details still. That's pretty good. So far our first 2 layers of fiberglass are looking awesome. I think we can go ahead and let this sit for at least a few hours.
8 hours later.
And now I'll go ahead and stir up some extra resin. That way we can start our layup for our 1.5 ounce layers. And of course it always helps to saturate your part before laying down some thick fiberglass. And now for another milestone check. Take a look at what we got. Looks pretty good. So far I'm not seeing any major issues. Looks like we got a lot of areas covered. I think we can go ahead and let this sit overnight.
The next day.
And after letting this sit overnight, we're going to repeat the exact same process with 2 more layers. And of course we like to bring our camera in. So far it's looking really good. I do like how all the details are starting to disappear. It makes it really easier to use the roller. So getting all these air bubbles out is kind of easier towards the end. But overall I'm pretty much fiberglassed out, so I'll go ahead and let this sit overnight.
The next day.
And after letting this sit overnight, we can go ahead and seal the part. And I'm going to use that same mold release agent we used earlier. This will help isolate the part from the air, that way the resin can cure. I'm going to apply 1 coat with my air gun, but you can go ahead and use a foam brush if you like, but I'm just going to give it a nice thick coat. I'm not really concerned if it runs or not, I just want to make sure it's sealed.
Three days later.
And now that we waited 3 days very anxiously, now we can go ahead and demold our part. So I'm going to use my trim removal tools and just try to get in between the part and the mold. And the whole trick is just get the corners, because once you lift the corners, this should come right out. And I'm going to use popsicle sticks as well when I start running out of trim removal tools. And trying to get in every one of these pieces. I'm just working my way around. Almost there. Oh yeah, that's one side. Let's see if we can get the other. Come on. Oh, beautiful. Oh man, that lifted right out. All right, now let's go and lift it up. And very nice. Oh man, this looks awesome. Let me go and bring it in front of the camera. That way you can see what I see. And would you look at that? That thing came out looking really nice. Man, I love how it looks like one piece. And I went ahead and set it down that way I could bring the camera around. Take a look at that. This thing looks really, really nice. This is actually better than my expectations. So far, I love how the details came out. Even the 5.0 came out looking really good. And so far, I don't really see any major defects or anything that's really concerned. Now, it's got a dull finish because of our green film. That mold release agent, it leaves this green film behind, but it peels right off. Look how shiny that is. Man, that looks really good. I'll tell you what, I'm going to peel off a little bit more just because I'm a little impatient. I want to kind of see how it looks. And look at that big ball of stuff. But yeah, look at that. It came out looking really good, but we'll remove the rest of it later on, so I'm not really concerned with it right this second. So let's go ahead and move on by removing all this excess fiberglass, which is our flange. Now I'm going to go ahead and lay down some Scotch tape just to provide me some guidance when cutting. And now I'll go ahead and take our oscillating tool and just cut along the edges. And so far, so good. We went ahead and cut a majority of the flange off, and we didn't nick anything, so that's a good sign. So let's go and remove all this Scotch tape for now. And now for this next part, I just want to show you this just because I found it interesting. Now look at this. This is one of the pieces we cut off, and it came out looking pretty good. I like how it looks really clean. I don't really see any air bubbles or anything like that. But I'm more concerned with the thickness. Look at that. It's about 0.2 inches, which is like 5.3 millimeters, which is pretty good thickness for this application. And getting back to work, let's go ahead and clean up our part. Now we still have some of that mold release agent, which is that green film, but it dissolves underwater. So I'm going to go ahead and spray it down with a water hose and just wipe everything down with a microfiber cloth. And I just want to make sure all these areas are scrubbed, just to make sure we get every shiny surface. And accelerating the drying process, we'll go ahead and blow it down with some compressed air, and then wipe it with a dry microfiber cloth. Now, even though we have more cutting to do, you're probably wondering why I went ahead and cleaned the part up. Well, it makes it easier to see the edge. So by me able to get a good view of it, I can go ahead and mark it with a paint marker pen all the way around, just so I can get a better idea of where I can cut. And since I'm clumsy and accident prone, I want to go ahead and add a layer of tape along the line, just provide a layer of protection as I'm cutting, just in case I slip. Now I'm going to go ahead and try my best to use my oscillating tool and see if we can trim off the remaining flange without slipping and hitting the part. So let's see what happens. So far, all the cutting went very well. Now I'll go and grab my sander and see if we can go and sand the edges just to smooth them out and get rid of all those cut marks. So I'm going to use 120 grit sandpaper and just go very slowly against the edge. So now let's go ahead and take a break from the outer edges of the part and start focusing on the inner cuts. Now we have the vents that we need to address. And I have a popsicle stick here, which seems to be the exact height of those vents, so it works out. So I drilled a hole right in the center of that, just to act as a guide so I know where to punch / drill. So I'll put the popsicle stick right in each corner, because it has a beautiful radius. Then I'll go ahead and use my center punch and just go ahead and create a little divot. That looks pretty good, and I'll do the remaining for the rest of the vents, and I'll do it for each corner. And now we'll go ahead and drill it out with a pilot hole, which is a 1/8 drill bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same angle as the previous vents. Alright, now we'll go ahead and blow it out with my compressed air. Very nice. And now let's go ahead and grab our step drill bit. And I went ahead and marked it so I know where to stop. And we went wide a hole to 3/8 of an inch, which is exactly what the previous vent was. So I'll go ahead and do the same angles as where the pilot hole is. And now that we drilled out the holes that create a start and stop point for these vents, now we just need to cut out the center. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it over. Then I'll go ahead and grab my oscillating tool and see if we can meet up these holes. And I'm going to take my time, go very slowly. The goal here is to create a slot. It doesn't have to be the same diameter as the hole. And now we can begin the tedious part of the job. Now I need to refine all these vent holes as well as the edge of the part. I'm going to start with the vent holes first with a rotary tool, just to go ahead and make these nice and smooth. Vents done, now we do the edge. So now let's go ahead and take a break from the rotary tool and let's go back to the drill. And let's go ahead and cut out our oil filler hole. So I went and used some construction paper, made a circle that's 42 millimeters in diameter, and then folded over just to get a hole in the center, just to act as a template for my center punch. So I went ahead and put that right into place. Found our center right there, and then we'll go ahead and punch it. And yeah, it feels pretty good. And then we'll grab our drill with our 1/8 drill bit. This is going to be our pilot hole as usual. And we'll go ahead and drill this out. And I'll try to do this as straight as possible. And there we go. Very nice. Now I'm going to go ahead and tape off this hole just to prevent any of this gel coat from maybe chipping when I use the hole saw. And the hole saw blade we're going to be using is a 1.5 inch. The ideal width would be a 42 millimeter, but the common size I had in my kit was 1.5 inch, and we'll go ahead and widen it to 42 millimeters, so that's no big deal. That turned out pretty good. Let's go ahead and clean it off. So far so good. Let's go and remove this tape. And yep, no chipping, no issues. So now let's go and refine that hole with our rotary tool just to widen it up, as well as just clean off those edges, make them nice and smooth. Now for this part of the video, this is where I'm sure I'm going to satisfy a lot of y'all's curiosity. How am I going to mount this to the engine? Well, I'm going to use a similar setup as the factory engine cover. So they have these ball studs right here. They have a diameter of like 9.7, 9.8 millimeters, which is basically 10 millimeters. So I went online, ordered these ball studs right here. Now these are basically made for gas lift struts, but they should work just the same, and they have a very similar diameter at the ball, which is perfect. So we're going to go ahead and use these. Now as far as how to mount those ball studs to the engine cover, I'll show you. Let me go ahead and put the engine cover on the engine just to kind of get a test fit as well. And now let me go ahead and bring the camera in, and I'll go and pick one of these holes. And that one looks good. And I'll show you these L brackets. These are metal L brackets. They're basically shelf brackets, but they're pretty sturdy. I'm going to mount one piece of it to the engine cover, and the other hole you see there is going to be for that ball stud. So this is going to work perfect. And using one of those shelf brackets, I'll go ahead and put it where one of the ball studs should go. And about right there, looks about center. We'll go ahead and mark this with a marker. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I'll try to hold that in place. And there's nice little 2 marks. And we'll repeat the same step for the other 3 brackets. And that was really simple. So now let's go ahead and center punch them out. And I always like to use a center punch just to keep the drill from walking. It really makes my job easier, especially when you're doing it like at an angle. And then we'll grab our drill and drill bit, which is 11/64, which is perfect for a 4mm screw. So now we need to do a little customization to our brackets. We need to trim off just a little bit. And I'm probably going to trim it off right there at 28mm just to give me a little leeway. So that's a good spot. And I'll go ahead and grab my grinder with a cutting wheel, and we'll go ahead and cut that right off. And it looks like that cut pretty straight. So now let's go ahead and grab a file and clean up all these edges. We don't want any metal burrs to get us later. Plus, I'm going to go ahead and round off all the corners just to give us a little sex appeal. And we'll repeat the same steps on the other 3 brackets. And so far it's looking pretty good, looks very nice. Now we just need to address that one hole right here because we got to get that ball stud through there. So right now as it is, it's not going to fit, so we're going to have to widen it out. So I have our step drill bit right here. And right there, I don't know if you can see it, but we're going to widen it to 11/32. So I went ahead and marked it, and we're just going to go ahead and drill these out. Alright, so that's pretty simple. Let's go and do a check. Oh man, that ball stud fit perfectly. Very nice. Let's go and do the same with the other 3. And just to give you an idea what the plan is, this is how it's going to kind of look. I want to address the extra threads in the ball stud, but the black flange nut, I kind of like that because it makes it a little bit better looking. So now let's go ahead and attach all those mounting brackets to the engine cover. So I have these 4mm screws, and they're black screws, and these are their button head screws. I use button head again just to kind of give it a little bit more eye appeal to it, so that way they're not really sticking out like a sore thumb. And then we'll go put our bracket on there. So far, so good. And then I'm going to add some washers to the back. And very nice. Try this without dropping it. And I'm also using lock nuts. And I'm going to tighten this up with a 2.5mm Allen wrench and a 7mm socket. And we're just going to go ahead and snug these up nice and tight. Next, we can go ahead and attach the ball studs. So I'm going to first by putting a washer on there and then placing it on the bracket. And then we'll take that flange nut we have from earlier. Go ahead and tighten it down. And this is going to be finger tight. We're not going to really make it really tight right now because we're going to go ahead and see how it fits on the vehicle. So those are all done. Now let's go ahead and place this right on the engine, or at least try to. Come on. Very nice. Okay, no big deal so far. Let's go ahead and snap them all in. Okay, that's pretty good. And do this side as well. Very nice. Actually fits like a glove. Now let's go ahead and take a 13mm socket and go ahead and tighten these up. The whole idea is leave them loose so that way we create no binding areas. And I'm going to go ahead and snug these up. That way it puts a little groove in the bracket. Okay, looks pretty good. And just to show you how it looks, look at that. And I'm going to go ahead and mark that threaded area, that excess threads, because we're going to go ahead and cut that off. So now we need to bring the engine cover back inside. So I'm going to take my trim wheel tool and just pry up on those ball studs. I just don't want to break anything. Okay, and let's get the last one right there. And oh, that popped right out. Very nice. Let's see if I can lift this off the vehicle and see if we'll do it without scratching anything. And there we go. And I went ahead and took off our ball studs, and right there you can see it's marked. That's the area we're cutting off. We don't have to, we're just doing it to give a little sex appeal. So we'll take our cutting wheel, go ahead and cut that right off. Very nice. Go ahead and file it just to make it nice and clean. And I left a nut on the stud just because it helps as far as getting those threads correct. So once you take that nut off, it makes it easier to put the nut back on. Alright, so that came off very nice. Blew off the excess. And now let's do a check. So this should thread right back on. And there we go. That will work. And just to show you how much we cut off, look at that. It's about 12mm. Yeah, roughly. I'd say almost a ½ inch. So we cut about half these threads off. So the next set I order, I'll just make sure they're a ½ inch. Alright, so now that all the ball studs are cut down, let's go ahead and reattach them. But I'm also going to add some thread locking compound just to make sure these don't come loose later on. And this is just blue thread locking compound, just in case I got to take it off later on. So we'll go ahead and finger tighten it, and then we'll go ahead and tighten it up completely with a 13mm socket and socket wrench. And just because devil's in the detail, I want you to do a little bit of extra paint work right here at the end. So I'm going to take a microfiber cloth and some rubbing alcohol, and I just want to clean off these studs and a little bit of the bracket, just pretty much any area that's silver. And once it dries, we'll grab our paint marker pen, give it a nice little shake, and we'll just go ahead and color in all these areas that are popping out at us. We just want to make this blend in as nice as we can. So I'm going to turn all that silver to black just to make it so you don't really see it. And that came out looking pretty good, so let's go ahead and finally mount our engine cover. So again, we're going to bring it in as gently as we can. I don't want to scratch anything. Now this does have a few micro scratches on it, but I'm not worried about it because I am going to paint it later. But for now, I do want to treat it as nice as possible. But for now, we'll go ahead and line up the holes, push down. And we'll line up the other studs with the other holes. Yeah, everything looks pretty good. Give that a nice little push. And that snapped right in. That's awesome. I'm always like to be a little cautious and check. And look at that. Nice and sturdy. And now for the very last thing in the video, we did wait a week, and now we're going to do a temperature test. So I have these probes I purchased, and I'm going to go ahead and place one of these probes on the top of the engine cover. And I'm going to just go ahead and hold it down with some painter's tape, nothing special. So I'll do that right there. And then we'll do another one under the engine cover. I want to kind of get an idea of what the temperature is above and below. And I'll try to put that in the center as much as I can. And then I'll go ahead and route and tape down the wires, so that way we don't really conflict with anything within the engine bay. So now let's go ahead and bring down our hood. Alright, let's go ahead and check our wires. Alright, didn't look like we pinched anything. That's a great start. And we go ahead and feed this in my passenger window, because that's where I'm going to have our temperature gauge. And we'll go ahead and put those wires right under the windshield wiper. As long as I don't turn them on, we're good. And starting off, this is about what the ambient temperature is, close to 60 degrees. But after driving for about 15 minutes, and this is in sport mode, we're getting temperatures, you know, about 100 degrees, 110 degrees, just while driving. But the true test is while we're idling, because we got about 140 to 160 degrees just sitting and idling in our parking lot. But I want to compare this to the old engine cover. So I'm going to go ahead and take off our new one. I'm going to take off all these probes we have. Go ahead and take our trim removal tool, pop it out, and lift that off and set that aside. Don't want to hurt that one. And I have my old dinky one, though. I'm just going to press that right back in place. And we'll put the same probes back relatively in the same position just to get a nice uniform test. And I'll put tape down just as well. Close the hood. And repeating the same conditions, we roughly got about 100, 110 degrees while driving. And then while idling, we got about 150 to 160 degrees roughly. So right now it's similar to the previous engine cover, but let's go ahead and go over the results. And comparing the two side by side, we can look at the max temperature readings, and it looks like they are very similar. They're not really significantly different. So as far as performance, these look like they're both the same. And now we finally get to look over what we worked so hard for several months. Look at this beautiful engine cover. This thing looks awesome. I loved how it turned out. It was a lot of work, but I think it was definitely worth it. And I also want to give a special thanks to Eastern Burlap and Trading Company. This is the fiberglass supplier that I was able to purchase my resin and my fiberglass from. They had great customer service and are nice enough to answer all my questions. Well, I hope you enjoyed the small video series. If you did, please like and subscribe.